And we kick off this evening with a look at the cinema.
I'm not a complicated man. I like cinema.
It's beautiful, beautiful cinema.
Cinema history come to life.
I found my solace in the small cinema I went to every Thursday night.
I'm a professor of cinema.
I go to the cinema for the stories.
There was no competition between the cinema and seminar.
I mean, it's not within the realm of conventional cinema.
And now,
here's Pace and Johnson
with a cinema review.
I'm sorry about that. It is Monday, July 20th, 2026, and thank you for joining me for another episode of Cinemaster's Reviews. Hope you're all having a nice day. Feeling a little hot right now. I've had no AC in my apartment since 9 a.m., so just kind of trying to survive right now. Got my door open, but you don't really care about that. You're here for the review of probably the biggest movie of the summer relative to how you view the word big in terms of just in terms of like discussion and hype, that being the Odyssey. I say we jump right in, starting with our first and only review of the weekend, the Odyssey, directed by Christopher Nolan. I usually try to do 2 reviews a week, but there really weren't any other major films opening next to the Odyssey, so this will be the only one you got, but I think it's gonna be big enough to fill a full episode. This is directed by Christopher Nolan. I believe it is his 13th film and his first since his Best Picture winning film Oppenheimer that came out 3 years ago at this point. By the way, looked it up. 3 years ago to this day, Oppenheimer was released the same day as Barbie. So Barbenheimer is 3 years old. Really does feel like that was sort of the peak of society, especially in terms of like film going like culture. But I digress. We're here to talk about the Odyssey. This is adapted. This is the adaptation of the many millennia-year-old poem written by Homer. This follows Odysseus's trek home after the Iliad. The Iliad is, of course, about the siege of Troy. Film gets into this a little, and the Odyssey is very much about Odysseus' 10-year journey back to Ithaca, the kingdom that he is the king of. Odysseus in this film, played by Matt Damon. We follow his trek back home. We also spend a lot of time in Ithaca following Odysseus' adult son, Telemachus, played by Tom Holland, as well as his wife, Penelope, played by Anne Hathaway. There are many suitors that are trying to betroth Penelope in order to gain power in Ithaca. The main one played by named Antonius, played by Robert Pattinson, and we're really just following this two-headed story about Odysseus' journey back, as well as everything that is going on in Ithaca. Until spoilers, I'm going to be spoiling this movie just because it is a 1,000-year-old poem. I think most people know the story of the Odyssey until Odysseus finally gets back and he has his chance to take back his throne. Christopher Nolan, throughout the years, has really kind of cemented himself as the director of our generation, specifically of the 2020s. Not to say that he hasn't had an incredible run up till this point. I think he probably gained extreme attention when he did The Dark Knight, even though he did Batman Begins and The Prestige beforehand. The Dark Knight was such a huge success. He was able to open a giant original movie with Inception. Interstellar is my personal favorite movie of his. I think that movie's genuinely a masterpiece. Maybe faltered a little with like Tenet, but I think that had a lot to do with the COVID-19 pandemic. And of course, he came back with Oppenheimer, which while not being his most financially successful box office wise, even though it was a giant hit, easily his most successful critically wise. Many people say early on in the decade, it probably is one of the best films of the decade, and there's a reason why it won Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actor, and many, many other Oscars. So many people were excited to see, okay, where does Nolan go from here? How can he take his talent of being able to tell these very rich and very giant stories in terms of scope? How can he go bigger? The Odyssey is definitely his answer to how big he can go. And I think this only cements the fact that there is a reason why Christopher Nolan is probably the biggest director working today, because The Odyssey is another incredible film in his filmography. It easily does feel like the biggest story in his career, which is not to say he hasn't done big stories in the past. Interstellar is a multi-year journey through space and time, but this but this film being about the ending of a 10-year war and being about a 10-year journey back of this crew going from island to island to different misadventures, and Odysseus sort of like realizing things about his life, maybe things that he feels guilty about. It really does feel like everything that Christopher Nolan has ever been interested in is at the forefront of this film in the best way possible. It takes a many millennia year old story, and it really does just like I think what makes this movie so successful is the fact that Nolan is able to take the story that is so old, that has been around through many generations, and finds what makes that story universal. What are the things that we today in 2026 can still grapple with? And I love the fact that when we see the flashbacks of Odysseus in the Trojan horse, of Odysseus in his army raiding Troy for essentially what the film gives is a very selfish reason. If you don't know the historical Battle of Troy, it was about one of the Queen of Ithaca, Helen of Troy, essentially being kidnapped by the Trojans. We learn essentially that she kind of went through her own free will, and it's about Greece invading Troy in order to get her back and send her back to Greece. It's very much framed as a very selfish war. We learn that the Greek soldiers were really just looking for a reason to invade Troy, and Odysseus has guilt for that. He doesn't like the fact that he killed many, maybe not innocent soldiers, but soldiers that didn't have to die in this battle. And now, as he's going on this long journey to get back home, what does it truly mean to be a king? The fact that he left his wife and infant son at home for many years alone. And everything is just sort of starting to grapple with him in the fact Matt Damon plays Odysseus. He adds a lot of this is probably like the biggest like blockbuster I've seen Matt Damon lead since maybe like, unfortunately, The Great Wall. Really terrible film. If you want to talk about a good movie that I've seen him lead, probably since The Martian. And I think I know Matt Damon caused a little bit of ire from people saying like, why is Nolan casting Damon? He seems like a strange choice to be playing Odysseus. I think he is wonderful here. He really highlights the heroic nature of Odysseus early on in the film. We see Odysseus and Penelope having these conversations of like, I don't want to be the one to go out to Troy in order to lead this invasion, but I know if I don't, then everyone will be at the whims of a more corrupt leader in Agamemnon. Agamemnon, played by Benny Safdie. You don't actually see his face in this movie, but I think he gives a really, really great performance. Just in terms of his like body, like body stance and how he like carries a presence. I think he's really great. And I think Damon also really brings a lot of the humanity to this character of Odysseus, where it could have been very easy to portray the character as just a sort of like otherworldly being, as this mythological figure that doesn't really like struggle, that isn't really like tortured by the things that humans are tortured by. But I think the way the character is written and the way Damon plays it, it feels very human in the way we watch him. And it also helps the fact that Damon does look like a Greek hero. This is probably the best in shape I think I've seen him in a while. I think the first like promotional image was just him in that Greek armor. He is excellent in this film, as is the whole supporting cast. This is probably the best I think I've seen Tom Holland. I've enjoyed him as Spider-Man, but I think we've just sort of had like the question of like, does he have the talent to lead big roles? Most of the scenes in Ithaca are very much put on his shoulders, and he does a very good job. Anne Hathaway, one of those actresses that I think we just take for granted a bit too much. She is unbelievable as Penelope. She has some really great scenes where there are these great long monologues of just like just the faith she has in her husband and why she is so resilient if she cannot let Ithaca fall. Robert Pattinson continues to prove to be one of my favorite actors working today. He is so good at as the movie's villain in Antonius, where like the first time this guy shows up, he's charismatic to a point, but he's also so scheming and so cunning. There's no way you could possibly trust him, and I think Pattinson is able to get at that fact really, really, really well. Like where you can tell how smart he is, but at the same time, there's always a level of like pathetic, like timidness to him, where whenever things start getting a little bit too a little bit too scary, he's always the first one to back him and be like, well, I'm going to let the other people I'm leading go into the more dangerous situations so I can be safe, and hopefully I can be the one to marry and bed Penelope in order to gain control of Ithaca. Pattinson, I think, is absolutely incredible as Antonius. John Leguizamo, I forget his character's name, but he's sort of like the elder statesman that is the only one that's still believing in who still does believe in Odysseus. Eumaeus, he's the one that essentially is instilling goodwill in Telemachus, of saying, hey, don't lose faith in your father. He will come back one day. He will be here. And John Leguizamo plays this part really, really well. Elliot Page is the young warrior of Sinis. Doesn't have a ton to do, but for maybe 5 minutes, kind of takes the movie over with their presence. And speaking of taking the movie over, I think my favorite scene of the film, because this movie tells a story in a very episodic nature, kind of like how the Odyssey goes, where there's one part where the soldiers land on an island and there's a giant cyclops, and there's a part where the soldiers land on an island and there's just a army of giant soldiers that we don't really get an explanation for. And it just sort of says like, hey, this is a mythological world. Certain things aren't going to have their explanation, and you just kind of have to roll with that. And I love that Nolan, who has really for the most part in his career sort of lived and died by the method of explaining every little thing about the world, saying like, hey, there are going to be some things in this movie that are just not things that would happen in real life, and it's Greek mythology. You're just gonna have to deal with it, and I really, really love that. But there's one moment where where Odysseus' crew lands on an island, and it's the only other living person there is this woman named Circe. If you know about Circe, you probably know what happens. I don't want to spoil it, but Samantha Morton absolutely just plays the character of Circe with such a level of just anguish and dread to her voice. She really only has one scene, so it would be tough for her to get an Oscar nomination. But it is the scene of this film, and I would love to see that happen if it does. This movie is going to get a ton of Oscar nominations come next January, but I just think that would be a really, really cool one. But yeah, like I said, you have Circe's Island, you have the Sirens. I think the way how this movie portrayed the Sirens is really, really strong. I love how Nolan just sort of kept like footage of the actual actors like throwing up on the ship, because if you've read stories about this movie, Nolan was actually shooting it on like in open water and on the sea, so there were parts where the actors literally were getting motion sick, and it really does add a lot of atmosphere. The sounds of the waves crashing on the water is really strong towards the end of the film, where you finally do have Odysseus finally having to take down all of the suitors led by Antonius. Just the way how like the arrows just start like flying right past the microphones. That sounds really, really great. I got the privilege of being able to see this movie in IMAX. It is absolutely the way to see this. Nolan was able to shoot this entire movie with IMAX cameras, and I really do think he gets the full scope of the art form through this story, because just how huge every single shot looks. Once again, this movie is shot by Hoytma, who has shot every Nolan movie, I believe, since Interstellar. I think he might have also done Dark Knight Rises. I can look that up real fast. Because I think the last one he did, because I know Inception was done by Wally Pfister. I'm not sure if Hoyt immediately started with Dark Knight Rises. Oh, no. Wally Pfister did do Dark Knight Rises. That was the last one. Every other one has been done by Hoyt. And yeah, once again, this movie looks absolutely stunning. It uses the style that Nolan likes to do, where everything looks very gray, everything looks very murky. But I think with the story he's telling of These are men on this ship that are dealing with storms, that are dealing with waves, that are just dealing with like a lot of like gloomy nature. I think that that those lighting choices really highlight just how good this movie looks. There's this one section where Odysseus and his crew essentially go to the underworld and speak with Hades. And like in any other scenario with how this movie is set up, had set this up, I was thinking like, is this going to take me out? Am I going to feel like this is almost too otherworldly? It's handled so well, and maybe one of the most like just frightening things I've ever seen Christopher Nolan shoot. Nolan has spoken a lot about how he wants to do a horror movie with both that scene and the college scene in Oppenheimer. I think he definitely has the chops to do it, but like I think he has the chops to do anything at this point. Oh, I cannot go by this review without talking about the score by Ludwig Göransson. It's so funny. Christopher Nolan, throughout the first half of his career, did a lot of scores with Hans Zimmer, who many would consider to be the best modern composer. And when Zimmer sort of, I think the last movie Zimmer did with him was Dunkirk. Everyone was like, is Ludwig going to be able to carry that gravitas that Hans Zimmer did? And he absolutely does, because once again, the Tenet score is excellent, the Oppenheimer score is excellent, and this score once again is excellent. I think when you are watching the Siege of Troy and you're hearing the like rhythm of the score with the steel drums be synced to the action that we are seeing, the action being absolutely incredible. I think it really highlights just how powerful the score is towards the ending, where this movie does finally hit its more emotional moments, where you see the resolution of Odysseus and Penelope's relationship. He is able to really like carry out those really emotional and heartfelt elements really well there. Yeah, Ludwig is very quickly making a name for himself as being one of the best composers working today, and this is just another feather in his cap as far as I'm concerned. Just looking through my notes, if I were to say there's one negative I have on this movie on my first watch, I do think maybe the first 20 minutes of the film are edited in such a way where we are jumping from timeline to timeline, from character to character, where it honestly feels like it's a little too quick and maybe a little bit too choppy at points where I was just thinking like, well, we are really not taking any time to breathe. Now, when you have a story like the Odyssey, I understand why we want to get our exposition out so quickly, and there's really not a ton of exposition, especially compared to other Nolan movies. So I think that's really interesting. But I think just that first 20 minutes, it almost does feel like whiplash for how the rest of the movie feels, because for a movie that is almost 3 hours, it goes by so quickly. I remember when we made it to the end of Ithaca, and when I was like, wow, we're already here, and this movie's like maybe has like 30-45 minutes left. It felt like I'd only been watching the movie for 30 minutes, and that's really great. I think just the way how Nolan paces this movie really makes you just so synced in to the adventure of Odysseus. Yeah, I think once again, this just proves that Nolan really is just like the director of this generation. When we look at like this time in film, we see that there aren't like a ton of like original like movies for adults that are being made right now. Obviously this is an original, but it's maybe the closest thing we have to like movies for adults right now. I think it's going to be hard to not think about this time period and not think of Christopher Nolan's name. I do think the ending of this movie is very much in line with the endings of many other Nolan films, where it's about this guy who is really just sort of like really looking back on the journey of saying like, I've made these horrible mistakes. Can I really be should I really be celebrated in the way some people are going to celebrate me? And while Oppenheimer, I think, makes the case of no, I should not be celebrated because I'm the one that's going to bring doom, I think this feels a little bit more personal in the way it's telling its story. If I were to rate this movie on a scale of 0 to 10 videotapes, I'm going high. I remember when I reviewed Oppenheimer, I gave it the exact same score, and I will be giving it this score as well if I can find it. Where is it? Yep, here it is. I'm going to be giving the Odyssey a 10 out of 10 videotapes. I think this is my favorite movie of the year, and once again proves why Christopher Nolan is one of the best directors working today. If you have the chance to see an IMAX, I cannot recommend it enough. But if you are going, I would recommend this movie to anyone, because I think anyone can find some reason to enjoy this film, and it really does just feel like a totemic achievement in terms of filmmaking. But thank you all for watching. Remember to like this video and subscribe to the video store. It helps grow our channel a lot. Next week, I'm going to be taking a break, but the week after that, I will be coming back with Spider-Man Brand New Day and I Want Your Sex, the newest film by Gregor Rocky. Thank you all for tuning in. And as always, watch more movies.
And the award for most vapid film review of the century goes to...
Okay, movie review. Okay, I thought it was beauty.
And he's now in cinema hell, where one day we'll all be reunited.
This is me at the Regal Cinema crying as I did through much of the film.